Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast, the Thanksgiving Eve episode. Tonight, you're going to pop on this podcast while you're getting ready to go to that bar in your hometown and see a bunch of people from your high school. Is that your guys' Thanksgiving Eve experience? Because it's often been mine, or like back in the day it was mine, and that's over for me now, and I'm really happy about it. But I think a lot of people do that still.
I hated that part of my life. In fact, I have a story, and some of my friends from high school can attest to this, and it comes up every now and then, and I glare daggers at them. So I always hated that. I hated running into people in high school. Like, I don't know, I just didn't love it. It was not my vibe. I just wanted to.
But you did do it.
I didn't mean to do it. So,
but you engage. It's a human experience thing. It's like going out on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and like running into people you don't want to see. Like but like I didn't want. It's kind of a universally. Yeah, no one wants it. So well, some people might. Well, actually.
in this particular instance, I specifically said I am not leaving my sweatpants, and they all wanted to watch. I think it was like a hockey game. They're like, you know what? We're going to go somewhere. We know where all of the reunions are. We're not going to go anywhere by those. We're just going to go to a quiet sports bar so we can watch the game. You can come in your sweatpants. We're just having a few beers. We're going to have some, like, I don't know, appetizers, watch hockey. You'll be fine. And I get there in my sweatpants looking like a bum. And lo and behold, it is
the hottest guy in the world. No,
it is like
the hottest guy.
I showed up.
It's the 5-year high school like unofficial reunion, and they hoodwinked me so that I would show up, and I was very salty. Very.
Oh,
upset.
So your friends lied to you.
Straight up, yeah. They led me there on false pretenses, and I was very mad because, like, not only did I just not want to be there, but I also looked like a bum because I was wearing like sweatpants and a hoodie. It was bad news.
And now. None of those people are your friends anymore. I have to imagine.
No, they're listening
to this podcast too, probably.
Probably. No, they get my my yearly call out like, "Hey, do you guys remember when you did this to me? That sucked." Every year.
Yeah, and it's well deserved. Yeah, I don't do that anymore, but I did have I had a stretch of a couple years where like the first couple times it wasn't intentional. There, I will admit, I will cop to a couple of years there where I was like, I know this is going to be the experience, and I didn't necessarily want it, but I accepted it, and in some way I embraced it, and that made me part of the problem, and I'm willing to admit that here. I encourage all listeners to stay home on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. If also I believe it's like a very dangerous night to be out.
I think so.
That's maybe pseudoscience,
say but like car accidents go up, muggings, fist fights, all that kind of stuff go up that night of the year.
Yeah, it's like a micro purge. Like it's people are just making really bad decisions because they feel entitled because it's Thanksgiving Eve.
We go back to my hometown specifically, Nerdbomber and I, every year, and I don't even worry about that. All my friends have gone away, so it's just my mom that's there.
I think it's going to be a great holiday. I'm Illeagle 86. I have Nerdbomber with me. I have Techtic with me. We're here to regale you with all things nerd pop culture before you go gorge yourself on a bunch of presumably turkey. I think that's still the culturally accepted mode of Thanksgiving feast. But we have Indie World. We're gonna be going to Indie World today. Not like actually physically going to. I don't even know if it is a physical show. But we watched the Indie World Showcase. That's what I'm getting at. We're going to be talking about that today, talking about some of the games that were shown there, going through our favorites, I would imagine is what we'll do. And then we have to talk about this Madam Web trailer, which came out last week and kind of swept the internet, I would say in a not great way. But we'll get into that. I have no idea what your guys' opinion of the trailer was. I'm not even sure if I fully formed an opinion, but I would say the internet, and in particular like the meme factory that is Twitter, has certainly sorted out what the public opinion is of Madam Web. So we'll get to that as well. But yeah, Wednesday before Thanksgiving, make good choices. And instead of going out, sit down, pop this on your Bluetooth speaker, make a hot chocolate if it's cold in your neck of the woods, or even if it's not. And let's all, get cozy with the Indie World Showcase. Now, you guys know, it's apparent in the title, Indie World Showcase. AAA titles, these are not. These are titles that are worked by small teams, some of which we see during the videos, kind of talking through the games they've made. I think a couple of these games were instantly released on the Nintendo Switch eShop as these trailers came out and as this gameplay footage came out. I think I've mentioned before, I think we've all talked before about how great that is. And in particular, I think we're supporters of the indie sphere of gaming. So let's run through some of these. I guess I don't want to trample on anyone's thoughts, but did either of you guys have like a major standout, I need to play this right now favorite? You know,
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Techtic, I was about to say
Yes.
when I see a lot of these games, I think the indie, I'm going to use the term indie sphere again. Like, I think when this level / caliber of games is discussed, you see so many side scrollers. Like, I think side scrollers is the
Gets my blood pumping.
well, yeah, it gets your blood pumping certainly, but it's also just like the kind of generic indie game milieu most of the time. So I saw a lot here that I know you were going to like. So I am particularly curious if there is one standout. Which one was it?
The one that like first, this was obviously played first, so it got me listening and paying attention. Shantae Advance. That was like one, it is right up my alley because I have said on this podcast before that the Game Boy Advanced is not dead. So much so that I modded my own and brought it back, and I continuously play it to this day. Like, I'm so glad that the studio came back and pulled together all the pieces of this to finish it up, because they understand that the Game Boy Advanced is here to stay. It's not a thing of the past. It just freaking slaps.
This game has been in some form of development for 22 years. That's just the context here. If you did not watch the Indie Showcase or know what this game is, 22 years ago, when it's called Shantae Advance because it was literally a Game Boy Advance game, and now it's coming to the Switch. So yeah, this you're right. I should have seen right away that this would be the one you'd focus on because you're an advanced guy. So, anyways, continue with your thoughts.
I'm trying to think and continue to talk, but I want to say, because this is a sequel to another game, but I want to say, wasn't there some link, the original Shantae, like, it has some link, I thought, to the Sonic team, but I might be wrong. Maybe it just has Sonic vibes, and that's what I'm thinking of here.
Definite Sonic vibes. I don't know of any specific connection, but
yeah, I think
I'm
making the connection up, but I got Sonic vibes. So, like, knowing how much that you love Sonic Techtic, like, as soon as we saw this trailer, I was like, this is right up his alley.
Now, it's certainly not a prerequisite to play this, I'm sure, but do you have prior Shantae experience?
I didn't even know Shantae was a thing. I really didn't.
Nor I.
And I was like, oh, cool, you get to transform into... Like, this is literally very similar to the premise that, like, I was talking about when I was thinking about making my own Online Warriors game. We were going to have Nerdbomber turn into a cat to get through puzzles. That was going to be her morph ball of sorts. And, like, you do that in this game. And I was like, oh, gosh, they did it. And I don't care because it looks so good.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of similarities across all of these games. One of the similarities of all these snippets that we saw, they have very limited time to show us things. And, a lot of the games that got bigger cutouts in the showcase, we're seeing stuff and the developers are kind of talking over it and talking through what their process was. And that's something that I'm not sure you often get. The AAA big showcases, they're very polished. There's a lot of cinematics. There's not often as much gameplay as I think you get watching these indie game showcases, which it's a quality of these that I value a lot. And, Shantae, like you said, I think it was the first one that played, and it set the tone very well for a lot of what the rest of these were going to look like. So Shantae Advance, Risky Revolution, definitely worth mentioning. I'm gonna go next just to mention a favorite, and then I'll turn it over to you, Nerdbomber. I had a couple that did stand out, but the one that I think stood out the most, and this is another one that it immediately was out. It was basically, hey, this is out now, you can go play it. There's also a demo. I'll say right now, I've had a busy week, so I haven't played either the full game or the demo yet, but Howl definitely caught my eye, both in the sense of the pretty unique visual style, but in the wake of Inscription, I'm thinking I want to go back to turn-based stuff, which I have very limited turn-based experience, but I think this may have had some similarity to it that
this was cool. This literally looked like you're playing a board game, and like in a game of like doing unique things, like that's a unique thing. And I love that you brought up Inscription because that was kind of the same vibe. And so indie developers keep doing stuff like that. It's unique and it needs to take off more in the mainstream.
Yeah, and this was another one that, we got probably a minute's worth of footage that was kind of ended with like, hey, if you want to understand what this is, go play the demo, and I haven't yet. But like from what we saw and from what the description I've read this is something that's going to be up my alley. So I definitely wanted to shout out that one. There's a couple other ones that we'll obviously get to, but Nerdbomber, anything here specifically that rustled your jimmies?
Oh yeah,
You
for
don't
sure.
mind my using that phrase.
My one thought about Howl is I just like even the story behind it, like a sound-based plague. So the protagonist is somebody who's deaf. And I just really like when, they build an interesting world like that. So cool. More props to Howl. Mine was Backpack Hero, though. I think you guys have kind of watched the evolution of my interest in roguelikes. I don't like very, very, very difficult ones. I like more of the indie style roguelike where it feels more like a puzzle. You have to get things right. There's not a risk of like, oh, I'm going to go back and I'm going to lose like 5 hours of progress, because typically with indie games, like you're really losing like smaller chunks of time. But I also think that this has a really unique mechanic because the mechanic behind it is you get unique backpack powers based on how you organize the items in your backpack and how efficiently you're able to pack things. How many items you can like have on you is based on how well you can organize your backpack. And that's just super interesting. It also seemed like there was a big variety of items that you could get in this game. And I think that's one of those things that keeps a roguelike interesting is when you have a lot of different tools at your disposal. The idea of having to go back and play the same level over and over and over again is less daunting because it's not just doing the same thing and sucking and failing and trying to learn a skill or technique, but you get to try different combinations of items. So this was definitely right up my alley. I do know, though, Techtic was a little salty that the title is Backpack Hero.
How did they not call it Pack Rat? You're literally a rat trying to efficiently pack your backpack.
It's a missed opportunity for sure. I'm glad this one was mentioned because, to be honest, I don't feel any particular way about this one, but I do think it's very interesting that they took a common concept in RPG games, which is, in a sense, inventory management. And they took that, which for a lot of players is considered a chore and like the not fun part of playing RPGs. And they were like, we're going to make this the fun part. Like that's what I took away from it. I think that's what they wanted me to take away from it. And I think that's a very interesting, subversion of, I guess I'll call it a trope. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, this is another one I want to mention. It launched the day that the showcase happened, which I don't actually know what day last week the showcase happened, but this one is again already out.
I want to say it was the 14th or something like that. But yeah, it is exciting. That's a thing that and I think we were accustomed to E3, you'd see trailers and games that you'd be looking 2, 3, sometimes even like 5 years into the future. And then you built hype over years. There's something to be said about seeing an exciting trailer and knowing, hey, if I want to, I can play this right now.
Yeah, I mean, the footprint of these games and also the general quality of the Nintendo eShop, which I've said on the show many times, like I'm such a huge fan of the Nintendo eShop. Like the footprint is small enough. I also think, kind of like we were saying about this game, the stakes are kept low enough. The play time is generally assumed to be relatively low. If you're going to sit down and play Backpack Hero, it might not be for hours on end. It can be, but it might not be. There's a much higher premium placed on tight gameplay, not as much stress. Like a lot of these are very ambiance focused. There's a lot of commonalities in a lot of these games we're going to get into that I'll try and highlight as we go through. But it's a totally different vibe than E3, where every game is huge footprint, huge stakes. You're going to want to sit down and lose yourself in this thing. That's not necessarily what these are. And it's not to say you can't lose yourself in a game like Backpack Hero, but I don't know if that's what its intent is. And I think that's really great. So it was like, the common traits that I identified in a few of these games, there were at least a couple games that mentioned procedural generation in how they're laying out their maps and how they're keeping gameplay fresh for players. There were a couple of detective stories, which I also thought was very interesting. I don't know if that genre, I feel like I'm hearing about that genre more
it's
lately,
definitely
which
making
I'm
a
a fan
comeback.
of. Yeah. And then there's a lot of like what I'm going to call ambiance-driven puzzlers. And we'll get into some of these games specifically, but I just think there were a lot of, and I mentioned side-scrolling too is kind of a very common thing that like there's a lot of, bits and pieces of each of these games that are extremely common to this genre of game, I guess. I will kind of mention like my second favorite one that I saw, and maybe the one that interested me the most was Death Trick Double Blind. This was one of the detective games. It's interesting in that you're basically playing as two characters, which I guess is why they call it Double Blind. You're playing as a magician and a detective, both trying to solve, I believe, the disappearance of someone. I can't remember if it's a disappearance or a murder, but each of these two characters that you play as gets two different sets of clues, and you need to take the clues and arrange them in a certain way to avoid contradictions. So it sounds like the gameplay is very interesting. The visual style, I actually don't know if it's for me.
It's a visual novel,
that's what it's referred to as. Yeah, it's a visual novel. So it seems like there's a lot of still shots that are kind of arranged, and motion is involved in a very specific way. To, I guess, when you think visual novel, you probably don't think what a traditional video game looks like. This one doesn't come out till 2024. This one, again, does have a demo, which I, again, have not yet played, but that was another one that definitely jumped out to me. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to go in order here. We can bounce around to other ones that, I'll use this phrase again, rustled your guys' jimmies. But I guess to round out the detective stuff, the other kind of whodunit game was On Your Tail, which the interesting thing about this one that you guys probably noticed, so this is it's referred to as a seaside vacation solving mysteries, is kind of what the premise
3D Animal Crossing.
No, this is the furry detectives.
This is it is furry detectives, but it does have, and I will say, I don't know if I love this part. This game kind of had a vibe of like, you can solve this mystery, and that's definitely the main point, but you can also like play mini golf on the beach and like make friends. I will say, I don't really want to do that. I want to show up and solve the mystery. This one was interesting in that it looked like it had like almost a card-based mechanic. You get clue cards that you have to arrange in a certain way to solve the mystery again. But like, they kind of, I get what Techtic said, Animal Crossing, and there's other games that were like that too, but like, it was a little bit Animal Crossing in that you will have to solve the mystery, but you can also do other things if you want to, like, I don't know, waste time. Like, it's not something I would do, but that was the other detective one I just wanted to mention. But I'll turn it over to you guys. I've blathered on here for quite a while. What other games interested either of you in this slate? Because there were quite a few more.
So Moonstone Island, and I know this is already out on the Switch. I think it came out back in September, but it's going to be a Switch exclusive console-wise and coming out in the spring. And I've seen this a couple times, and it looks like a mashup of like Pokemon and a little bit of Animal Crossing, and there's procedural generated dungeon elements, and it looks really cool. It looks like something, I'm not really sure. Like, it even has like RPG elements where you can interact with different characters. So, like, I'm not really sure if you don't want to do like all of the elements. I think you can still have a fun, cohesive experience in this game, but there's so many different things that you can do. My only fear is like sometimes in these games, because they're dabbling in so many different genres and there's so many different components of the game, kind of like that jack of all trades, master of none saying, like, I wonder if it'll all do really well or if it'll kind of feel a little bit like slapshod because there's so much going on. But I don't know, there's something about this, and like even the graphic style brings me back to the OG Pokemon games, and it scratches some kind of itch that I feel like I kind of want to play this.
My literal notes on this game was deck builder, farm sim, turn-based combat. Like, I agree with you. This game looked like they played a bunch of different other games and then just mooshed them all together.
Yeah, this one, I'll admit, it lost me. Whenever a game is like, you can farm, I'm like, all right, this isn't for me. So like, unfortunately, like you said, it's kind of throwing the kitchen sink at it, and a lot of the other elements definitely interested me.
But I don't know if you have to farm. Like, that's what I'm curious to see. If like you have to do every element of this game, or if you can kind of pick and choose.
I don't want to farm.
The next one that I want to mention is a Highland Song. First thing is, I'm a little bit of a child, and I want you to rewatch this trailer with the guise of Michael Scott, because it felt like every other line. I kept saying that's what she said. But as far as the gameplay goes, I thought it was kind of really interesting because they took like Scottish scores, and you're jumping, climbing, and moving with the rhythm of the score. So it's kind of like a rhythm game, but it's using like a unique genre of music for you to kind of traverse your own path, which I thought was kind of interesting and kind of chill vibes. You know, I can always go for the chill vibes games.
Yeah, this was definitely a very ambiance driven. You're not even necessarily playing this game for the gameplay, is what I would argue. And the gameplay, like you said, it's rhythm based. It's a very specific thing that people may respond to, but like, I think you're playing it to be in the environment that it provides. And there are other games that were like this, but like, that's definitely what I would say about that one. I would say that, I'm scrolling up to find the title of it because I can't remember. Planet of Lana was very similar. And like, Planet of Lana is a platformer, but it's driven by vibes. I do think that's what I would say about it. And another game, obviously much darker set of games. I don't know if you guys ever played, one of them is called Limbo and Inside are the names of the games.
Oh, yeah.
They're side-scrolly, platformy games that have some puzzle elements, and from a gameplay perspective, they're minimally interesting, but from a ambiance/vibes perspective, like that's what the draw is to those games. That's probably what the draw is to Highland Song. It's probably what the draw is for Planet of Lana. And that's not me minimizing what the gameplay is. It's just me saying that like you could play a bunch of other platformers, some of which may have more involved and pleasing elements to the gameplay, but wouldn't be able to sell as much about the environments. So I think Planet of Lana is, and again, with the indie games, these are not games I would probably not pay more than, I don't know, $10 for Planet of Lana. But, you know, if you go in with the correct attitude and at the right price point, a lot of these games have so much potential. So yeah, I did want to mention Planet of Lana.
I do think Blade Chimera looked pretty good. There's something interesting about like using your weapon in different ways, whether it's solving puzzles, trying to like modify the environment around you. I think that's kind of neat, being able to just, you know, transform and have a modular weapon. Especially, I'm not a huge side scroller person because I feel like I end up just like mashing buttons. But if I have to slow down and stop and think a little bit more and solve some puzzles, it could be cool.
Yeah, Blade Chimera, I'm Techtic, you're the Metroid guy. This one probably looked the most Metroid-y to me. I think that's to its credit.
My literal comment was dystopian Metroidvania. So
yeah,
yes, I couldn't agree more. This just looks like it's one of those, if you've got that itch, here's your scratcher.
Nerdbomber, you mentioned, I think, the coolest element, which was the environment manipulation. Like, I just think that's extremely cool and provides a lot of replay value. So, glad you mentioned that one. A Start Named Eos, first person. This was, again, I'm going to use the phrase again, driven by vibes. This is all about vibes.
Well, this also
puzzle game.
It had like
in which
almost like a detective vibe to it too, though.
This didn't hit with me, I will say.
You're puzzle solving and you are mystery. You're solving an overarching mystery by solving puzzles. You're also using a camera and taking pictures of stuff. I will say the puzzle part I understood. They showed at one point you had to pack a suitcase in a certain way. Like, I don't know why are you taking the pictures and what do the pictures do for you? Do you have to take them a certain way? If they got into the specifics of that element of the gameplay and why it was necessary and what it provided, I missed it, because it was clear that was kind of the designing principle of the game, is they wanted a game that was driven by photography and what I guess I'll call photographic storytelling.
They said at one point in the trailer that the photos would connect you to the past. So I'm almost wondering if you could like frame up the photos in a similar way, if then you get teleported back into the past so you could like figure out the mystery. I don't know. Something about this, it looked very pretty. It just didn't hit for me, and I'm not really sure why.
This one, again, I wouldn't say it hit for me necessarily. It's one that I wouldn't pay more than $10 for, but there's a universe in which I would pay $10 for it. Like, I've played games like this. I'm trying to think. There's a game I played with a very strange title. I can't think of it, but it's a game very similar to this where you're traversing a story in a unique way, and the key to this game being successful is the power of the story. It sounds like you're trying to figure out what happened to your mother who is missing, I think is what it was. And the payoff better be good. You know, like there's a lot of games like this, you know, I know Nerdbomber, you've played games that are essentially walking simulators, but they're very story driven.
Love them.
And the story has to be good. Like, I don't know that the puzzling and the exploration in this game are going to be what makes you remember it and recommend it to people. What will make you recommend it to people and remember it is probably how good the story is and what the story is. So obviously it's not the kind of thing they can tell you or show you very well in the trailer, other than just to give you a one sentence, your mother is missing, you need to find her. But it will probably live and die by that element. Outer Wilds, this was one that I didn't really vibe with. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
So
I don't even know exactly what my problem was with it, but it was also late in the showcase. So by that point I was like, I know what I want and it's not this.
I have actually tried to play this game, and this is like a very well-regarded game. This has actually been out for a while on other consoles. I think this might be the first time that it's coming to the Switch. And I've played it. I think it's been on Game Pass, or maybe I even bought it at one point. I don't know. I tried it maybe a couple years ago, and the game basically throws you into this world where you're an alien, I think, on a planet in space, and you have a spaceship, and nobody really tells you what you're supposed to be doing, and you're just supposed to like figure it out as you go. And then you have a timer, and the entire world like restarts at the end of a timer. And everybody told me it would be relaxing, and it was just stressful, and I was confused. I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I don't think I will try it again on the Switch either, because this one just, a lot of people love it, and it's not for me. I need a little bit more direction. But it doesn't want to give you that.
You know that I'm essentially the same way. You know, I I wouldn't necessarily say I need a strictly linear story or something. I don't need guardrails all the time, but
it gave you literally none.
Yeah, I certainly need them sometime, and it sounds like this game gives you literally zero. So maybe that's what I saw in this that didn't necessarily entice me. I think rounding it out, the last one I have on my list here that we have not talked about was actually, I think Shantae may have been first. This one may have been second. Core Keeper.
Oh yeah, this was co-op.
I think, was this the one that had, there was one that had like 8-player co-op? I think it might have been this one, which is like a lot at once. This one, again, had farming in it, and I was like, I don't want it. So like, unfortunately, there's certain trigger words that when I hear them, I'm like, I don't want to be in the agricultural community. So I'm out.
Honestly, that's totally fine. I think it is an acquired taste. Like, I used to be like that very heavily. Before I started playing Animal Crossing, I was very vehemently like, this is boring, and I don't know why I would waste my time doing this. Like, I have chores that I could do around my house, and this just feels like it would stress me out. And there is something weirdly satisfying, and maybe it's just like I hit a point in life where I have a lot more stressors than I used to, and it is nice to just like calmly relax and freaking like pick flowers, and you don't know why you're doing it. It's just like
she 100% prefers in-game chores to real life chores.
It's true.
And you see a lot of games doing it because Animal Crossing was an absolute phenomenon, and Animal Crossing, you're just doing menial tasks. Like all you're doing in Animal Crossing, as far as I understand it. Like
Animal
you're like
Crossing,
building
you're
your house and
trying to pay off your mortgage. It's very much like real life.
Exactly, but it scratches an itch. I think it is doing chores, but if it's not doing your real chores, there's an escapist element to it that I think a lot of people responded to, especially during the pandemic. Like that's when it was such a huge deal. So like I do see Core Keeper to some extent trying to emulate some of that, but it also like I thought the creature battles in the Core Keeper trailer like looked really cool. It just, I feel like they mentioned it at the end and it was like kind of secondary to what the rest of it was, which was like basically resource gathering in various ways, which I'm not nearly as interested in. So this was another one that they in a sense they were like, what if we combined the elements of like 4 different games and made one game? And to some extent you want to be like, maybe just scale it back a little bit, especially considering that you're an indie game. But maybe that's being unfair to Core Keeper and to its developers. It's just not one that I saw as particularly enticing. In any case, we want to know what you thought of the games at Indie World, the Nintendo Indie World Showcase. So you can hit us up on Twitter/X at Online Warriors 1, which is our main show account. I am OW86. We have OW Nerdbomber and OW Techtic. We're all there. We're all ready to chat with you about any and all of these games. Which one did you like the best? Which one was our opinion on just wrong? Because probably there was at least one wrong opinion, probably from me. So we can get into that as well. We're going to take a short break now before we come back with the second half of our episode, which will be dedicated to Madam Web and all that was. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I did not shout out our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Stephen Keller. As one of the perks of being a Patreon producer, Stephen gets this shout out every episode. He also gets input into the weekly game segment, which unbelievably I am hosting this week. Let's not gloss over that. I'm hosting the quiz this week. It feels like the first time in like months. I don't know. I will check the tape, but like it's been a while. I had to like write up a quiz. It was crazy. My brain had like forgotten how to do it. Steven supports us at the highest of our 3 levels of support on Patreon. As a result, he gets his producer shout out. He gets input into the weekly game segment. He, of course, gets access to the monthly secret segment and the monthly vlog. And he gets the occasional guest spot on the show. You want to be like Steven. You want to be a knight. You want to have a sword and a shield and a mace and all that stuff. If you're not quite so noble, you can also be a squire, which I believe amounts to carrying around the knight's stuff, and that gets you access to the monthly secret segment and the monthly vlog. There's also a page level which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. You can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast for any and all of the details on any and all of those levels of support. You can say hi to us, and you can say hi to Steven, and consider giving back to this show that you've hopefully listened to for a while. Or even if it's just your first time and you're looking to support us, we will obviously welcome that as well. So again, it's patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Thanks again to Steven. We'll be right back to talk about Madam Web.
Gorge. It's a podcast where my friend Sarah and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a topic.
The body count in this children's movie.
It's insanely high. The reason he's able to be a good assassin is because no one would expect a gorilla to kill you.
I made the incredibly stupid decision to start marble hornets.
And the robot says, I know where we can find your baby. It was stolen by Cap'n Crunch.
He sounds like Chuck Huber.
Yeah. How did you know? I was going to say that. The Gorge. 3 times a month, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Madam Web. We got a trailer for this last week. This is coming out February 14th of next year. Madam Web, of course, is Sony's latest comic book inspired movie starring Dakota Johnson as Madam Web herself. The thing I've read and heard the most about this movie is I'm trying to remember what the phrase is. He was the guy who was with my mother in the Amazon studying spiders just before she died, which is like a line that is said by Dakota Johnson in the trailer that is like pretty patently ridiculous or like delivered not that great. And so it's just been like, when I mentioned the meme factory earlier in this episode, that's what I was referring to, is that I'm basically just seeing that basically as a written meme now.
One of the things that I got out of this that kind of fits that line and like the writing quality, I guess, of that line, I got that overall vibe that like this really wanted to be a CW style show, and then they made it
I've seen that comparison as well. Yeah, I've seen that comparison. This is a CW show that they made into a movie. I've also seen a lot of Morbius comparisons drawn, which obviously is not what this movie wants. I did not see Morbius, but I would say the general press / vibe surrounding Madam Web is not good.
So one thing that I've always said with a lot of really good content, and we talked about this on our last week's episode with regards to video game adaptations, if you stay true to the fan content that everyone loves and is well received, it'll generally be good. This looks like they took the names of characters and just said, fuck it, we're winging it.
Like, what little I've read suggests that this is based on like that the villain in this story is one of the most disliked villains in comics, or at least in like Spider-Man adjacent comics. And Techtic, maybe you can speak more to that, maybe you can't. But like what I didn't understand, and let's just walk through some of the things that I thought were wrong with this. First of all, I think it's generally problematic, especially considering that most people don't have comic book knowledge going into movies like this, myself included. At some point, I think in the middle of this trailer,
honestly, for this movie, I think that's because it doesn't seem like they've taken any inspiration from the comics.
Well, hold on though, because what the point I'm trying to make is like we get a certain amount into this trailer, and the quote unquote villain character, or it's later made apparent that this is the villain, appears, and you look the character up and down, and if you're me, I'm like, oh, that's Spider-Man, because he looks like Spider-Man.
It looks like Spider-Man. Weird knockoff Spider-Man. And if you're a villain or even anybody tertiarily related in the universe of Spider-Man, which I'm assuming this is connecting back to, why would you make a costume that looks just like Spider-Man?
Because I think that's sort of something that they're trying to make you think it's a certain actor, but it's not. I think that is supposed to be Ben Reilly, a.k.a. the Scarlet Spider, a.k.a. the clone of Peter Parker. And I think that's supposed to be this big surprise that they haven't revealed yet, and they didn't want to give that up in the trailer.
Is this a Thomas Wayne? Is this a Michael Keaton as Thomas Wayne situation waiting to happen? Because we remember
Ben Reilly has a large role in the Madam Web comic books, and if you look at this Spider-Man-esque character, another name for Ben Reilly when he first comes in as like an imitation Spider-Man, he then takes on his own persona as, quote, the Scarlet Spider, because he's got this reddish color. And what did we see? A reddish color guy that looks like Spider-Man. This screams Ben Reilly to me.
I thought he was black. The lighting was bad. But let's pivot over to Madam Web herself for a second, because I want to understand her. What I gleaned from this trailer, again, not having any comic book knowledge about who this lady even is that she has what I would call precognition.
Yes. She's clairvoyant.
She's clairvoyant. Now, is that a power that she got from spiders? Like, I'm asking very basic questions. Did she get that power from spiders in the same way that Spider-Man got his spider sense from being bitten by a spider? Or is it different?
Madam Web
I want to know.
Is 0% spider. She is a mutant with clairvoyance.
So why are they putting her in a spider web?
Yeah, so that's my point right there. That's confusing because everyone's going to look at this and say she's Spider-Woman, and she's not.
No. Madam Web takes inspiration from her last name. And so she kind of took on that persona of Madam Web. She's a clairvoyant, like, old lady with has like all of these like breathing systems and stuff that makes her look like she's in a web.
Dakota Johnson's not old.
That's again, they are completely
not yet
deviating from the comic books. And so that's one side of it. And then here's the other side of it, and why I have trouble with this. They're trying to develop several characters that all have their own in-depth backstories on how they got their abilities in one movie. That is a lot. And it's going to do none of them justice. It's just going to be, here's the kitchen sink situation.
That feels very much like
Spider-Man 3.
That too. And like DC failure.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of justice, it sounds like what the Justice League did, and we know how that went. Put some respect on Spider-Man 3 and my guy Tobey Maguire. Yes, they had many villains, but it was great.
Because it's pertinent to this universe.
The characters you're referring to, I assume, are the trio of girls who seem adjacently connected to Madam Web. Like, one girl lives in the same apartment building, etc. And then halfway through the trailer, it becomes apparent that they have suddenly all gained some kind of superpower.
Yeah, so none of this is spoilery because it's all on like the IMDb on who they are and what their characters are. So Sydney Sweeney is playing Julia Carpenter, aka Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman got her own set of powers from a, quote, secret government group that accidentally injected her with spider venom and like exotic plant serum. And that's how she got her power. They like picked her and like watching her because she's athletic, and they're like, we're going to see what happens. And then she got spider powers. That's like a whole storyline. Celeste O'Connor, aka Maddie Franklin, is another Spider-Woman in the show. She got her powers from eavesdropping on Norman Osborn, basically, and getting hit with the experiment he was trying to hit himself with. And then she got Spider-Woman-esque powers. That's her own backstory. And then let's throw in a third one, because why the heck not? Isabella Merced. She plays Anya Corazon, who's Spider-Girl. And she got her powers from a secret spider society that were trying to heal her with a ritual. And she got powers of a spider from that ritual. It's like magic stuff. So like completely different backstories on these completely different characters, and they're going to flesh all that out in a movie? In one movie?
Yes.
Do you know what I feel like they're trying to do here? They're trying to make it like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where you have like your young group of Spider Girls, and then you have your wise, clairvoyant older person, which I'm sorry, Dakota Johnson is not old enough to play that kind of role, but hey.
Still get it.
Here's the thing. Nerdbomber.
They even drove around in a van.
In movies, people need to be hot.
They have a van.
In movies, people need to be hot. Old ladies, not hot. Dakota Johnson, hot. Like I'm looking at this movie and this trailer through the lens of a very misguided Sony executive walking into a boardroom and just kind of saying to a group of people, "We need a comic book girl power movie. Make it happen." And then he just like walked out, and everyone was like, "What do we do?" And this is what came out.
They should have gotten Meryl Streep, though. Again, no hate on Dakota Johnson, but if you're going to follow the backstory that Techtic kind of gave here, like, Meryl Streep it. Pay the money.
Well, the backstory that I really think...
I like the phrase...
I don't know what story they're doing. The thing I think they are doing, though, is definitely the clone of Peter Parker. Now, I have more data that supports this theory on the movie. If you look at the cast, you'll also notice Mary Parker, a.k.a. Peter's mom, and Ben Parker, a.k.a. good old Uncle Ben. And so the data suggests that there's 100% a tie-in to Peter Parker. His DNA is definitely floating around somewhere. And so why the heck not? Scarlet Spider, I'm telling you, he's coming. Calling it now. Lock it in.
In canon, I had this question too, because it appears we see Adam Scott for like 2 seconds in this trailer, but in the 2 seconds that we see him, he appears to be like a cop and or FBI agent. Is that Ben Parker's typical
Ben
backstory? Because Ben Parker, in what I know, he's just an old uncle who's like retired. like if he had a past career, which I guess I'm sure he did because he was a person, I don't know what it is. So like I don't know either if like is that. I'm going to Google it right now because I desperately want to know, like, is that his canon?
He worked as a carnival barker at Coney Island, apparently. And then he went on to join the military and serve his country as a soldier.
Okay. Boy. Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I mean, is like, and again, the Justice League, I think, was kind of like this too, where like, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to like make a new story of like all these fun young characters that the kids can relate to. And also we'll put in Uncle Ben for the old folks who want to feel connected to this movie. Like, and by the way, I don't really feel, and as an old person, because I think I am an old person in this scenario, I don't really feel connected to any of it. So...
Well, especially if you're trying to tell me that Uncle Ben is...
Adam Scott?
Yes, thank you. I
like Adam Scott.
As Uncle Ben, like, I'm sorry, I don't connect to that. Adam Scott is Parks and Recreation. Adam Scott is not Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben was a frail old man. I don't relate to that.
I wouldn't call him frail. He was definitely strong.
Frail.
No.
Let me counterpoint that, because so I agree that canonically Uncle Ben is like the kindly and wise old uncle, and keyword old. However, look at what MCU Spider-Man did with Aunt May. Like,
that's
Aunt May used to be Rosemary Harris, who was like this very old lady, and she was kindly and she was awesome. And then she was, what's her name? Sally Field, who was like an older lady who was kindly and awesome. And then MCU was like, heck that noise.
Make her
sexy
hot.
Aunt May. Yeah, like, so like, and granted, Adam Scott is not someone I think most people would consider
Make him hot.
Sexy, but like, they're like, make him young and cool and edgy and police. Like, I don't know, it feels like they were like, let's do what the MCU did with Aunt May, where they made Aunt May hot, you know? Like, I mean, like, what I'm saying is that it's possible to like kind of reinvent the character's backstory, even if in the small way of like making Aunt May hot, but like, I don't know that they did it here, like, or that they did it effectively. I don't want to just sit here and crap on Madam Web this whole time, but like the comparisons that I've seen, which like, yeah, one of the main comparisons I've seen, which is you said, Nerdbomber, is like, it looks like they were forced at gunpoint to turn a CW show into a movie. That feels like a very, very apt comparison to like what this movie is, or what it looks like it is. And same with the Morbius comparison. I don't really know much about Morbius, but like thinking back to the Morbius trailer, which I'm sure we talked about on this show, this looks kind of like that. And you do have to wonder, like, in as much as they are Justice Leaguing it, where they're like, all right, many superheroes at once. At some point down the line, Sony's intent is to tie this stuff in with Spider-Man, correct?
I think so.
Would you say at this point, considering the Venom movies and now this, and I believe Morbius is also intended to follow this path, would you say that they are doing that effectively?
Absolutely not.
No, right? Like, it's, you know, the MCU, the bottom line is everyone's trying to emulate what the MCU did, right? The MCU, people give them crap a lot, and understandably so, for what is in the industry referred to as the stinger, which is like the post-credit scene where they pull towards the next movie. I'm starting to think that them kind of pioneering that was like one of the keys to their success, and now it's made fun of, and it's, you know, maligned because it is so kind of universal and repetitive in the MCU movies. But like, I don't know, they built a very well-connected group of characters, and right now the Sony thing is missing entirely. Like, I know Venom had a post-credit scene, but like was it Spider-Man that had the post-credit scene with Venom in it? Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what it was.
Well, it's tough. Like, when you think about it, Sony, they only have the rights to a very small amount of characters. Its main character is now part of the MCU, and that's a very interconnected kind of self-fulfilling bubble. It's very hard to replicate the quality of the MCU, even if it in its waning quality now. Like, it is held to a higher standard and provides a higher standard of cinema experience than a lot of other superhero movies that we've gotten in the past. I just don't think, like, Sony is trying to do the impossible and ride the coattails of the MCU, and it's just falling flat because you don't have I don't even think they, like, have a plan. I think they're just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks.
And it's a complicated setup, right? Because of the fact that Spider-Man is also in the MCU, which is astronomically more successful. Like, I don't know what their plan is for, quote unquote, pulling Spider-Man out of that universe and into theirs, because I would think that's what's going to be required for this to work in the end. I don't know if that's possible. Like, I don't know if that can be done in a very good way. Like you said, it almost feels like they're like, you know what? Keep making these movies and we'll figure it out at some point. Which, again, is definitely not what the MCU did. The MCU had a plan, or at the very least, they had a plan up until, you know, Endgame. I'm not sure their plan is as good now, but that's a whole nother conversation. But like, Madam Web feels like a symptom of a larger issue, as many of these movies often do, right? It feels like this movie is pasted on, and the movie itself might be okay if the intentions were a little bit different. But the intentions right now are, this is going to tie into something later, so just make it and don't worry about what it itself is. Which kind of sucks for Dakota Johnson. Also, she should be older, because that's the intent of the character, and that's the origin of the character, I should say. It's the source material. So, yeah, Madam Web, this is a Valentine's Day release, which again, like I said, I guarantee you a Sony executive walked into a boardroom and said, we need a girl power superhero movie, and it needs to come out on Valentine's Day. So...
Also, it's a crazy Valentine's Day release. Like, what?
And we also didn't Morbius come out like around Valentine's Day too? Like, I want to look that up because I think Morbius was also like a dead of February release. Did it really come out on April 1st? Did it really come out on April Fool's Day, or is that in and of itself an April Fool's joke?
I can't remember.
It literally did.
Did it?
It appears to have literally come out on April 1st, which is
I mean, maybe they
insane.
were resigned. Maybe they were like, we know this movie's a joke, so might as well.
I guess it just feels like it came out in February because it wasn't good. In any case, yeah, Madam Web, February 14th, 2024. We'll see what happens, but in the meantime, it's like it's a meme, at least until the next trailer comes out and tries to dispel the meminess of it all. So that brings us to What Are You Up To Wednesday? This is the part of the show where we talk about what we've been up to. And I think I might have started with Nerdbomber last week. The long story short is I'm going to start with Techtic this week. So, Techtic, the floor is yours. Regale us with your exploits.
So, my weekend was kind of filled with like a lot of personal stuff that I don't want to kind of bore you guys with. But the main thing that I want to give a shout out to is brunch. You know, brunch places, they really be doing it. It's a great little weekend kickback, meet up with some friends, enjoy some liquor beverages, and have some breakfast food. You can't go wrong. So that's really all I got. No, you can't go wrong.
I think I've said on the podcast before in a secret segment, I'm not a brunch person. I'm not like crapping on your brunch experience. I just think I'm not engineered for brunch.
Why? Like, is it the early
he hates
drinking?
fun. We've established it.
Is it the breakfast food you're not a fan of? Like, I'm trying to
I do hate
pinpoint it.
fun. I don't like eating large meals early in the day. So that's definitely a big part of it.
If you're going any earlier than like noon, you're doing it wrong.
But if it's lunch, then it's lunch. This is my problem. I have a fundamental problems with brunch. If you're saying go at noon, then it's lunch. And I'm going to get lunch food. I'm a broken person. I'm a broken person.
Did you never
that.
have Brenner breakfast for dinner? Are
I'm
you
not
like
a big
vehemently
Brenner. I've done
against
it.
that?
I'm not vehemently against Brenner, but like I'll tell you, I used to do that when I was younger. Like my mom would be like, "We're doing Brenner." In my adult life, I don't think I've ever once done it. And
now, are you against like
about that?
The sweet aspect of like breakfast? Do you not like waffles, pancakes? Do you not like breakfast sandwiches? Like, do you want something more like savory? I'm trying to figure out what kind of like breakfast food would entice you to go to brunch.
I don't think that's the issue. Like because I have gone to brunch. When I go to brunch, I have options. Like there are sweet options and there are savory options. So like there's going to be something that fits the bill for my palate. I think it's less so a palate issue and more so like whenever I like go out and have a big breakfast or a brunch, I'm like, it sets the course for my entire day in a way that I don't care for. Because I feel like I need to either take a nap or like I sometimes feel nauseous because I've eaten so heavily in the beginning of the day. I have a very delicate little body. and brunch is an assault on that concept. So I think we should just leave it at that. Like we can maybe on a secret segment we can get into my problems with brunch and you can try and psychoanalyze that because it seems like you really want to, and I'm open to that.
Well,
but
the thing is,
this might not be the right forum.
We need more brunch friends, and it's sad that you don't like brunch.
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Also, I like a mimosa. Don't get me wrong. I'm a human being. I like a mimosa, but brunch also one of the common like. There's a line in Justice League, which I know we just talked about as being a bad movie, but I like this line where the Flash is like talking about how he doesn't understand brunch because you go and you wait in line for an hour to have basically lunch. And my God, I've never empathized with a fictional character so much in any movie ever.
That long?
Where are you going?
Bro, are you kidding me? Like Sunday brunch? It's like an event. Which you guys are proving my point. Like it's everyone's going to brunch just because it's brunch.
No,
and so
I'm
it's
like we got our
thing.
food within like 15 minutes. I think
I
you
don't
just
know
go
what
to
tell you.
bad
I've had a lot of experiences with brunch where it's like, what if we waited for like over a half an hour?
No, I don't do that. I can't do that. Anywhere I go, that's too long of a turnaround. I don't care what meal of the day. If you take longer than a half an hour to serve me my food, we have problems.
Well, I'm certainly glad it didn't happen to you. I'm just saying that has been part of my body of negative experience with brunch. So anyway, I'm Techtic. I'm glad. I don't want to take the spotlight away from you. I'm glad your brunch was successful.
I enjoyed it.
Very good. Yeah, PSA, go to brunch. Let me know if this is a good, like, at @OWLegal86 on Twitter. Like, tell me about brunch. Like, either commiserate with me or tell me I suck. It's really one or the other. I feel like people are going to have a strong opinion either way. So I invite that. I had a similar week/weekend in the sense that, like, it was really jam-packed with a lot of adult responsibilities, and, like, also my little brother got married, which is, like, it was a thing that happened to me that I'm willing to put into my update, but also it's not, like, fun for the listeners for me to be like, I was in a wedding, you know? Like, it was, what I will say about it is that I stayed up until past 1 a.m, which, if you know me, is a big deal. Was it the last wedding I went to? There was a wedding I went to within the last year where I went to bed. I left the wedding and went to bed at like 8:30 p.m.
Left at 8:30?
Was it your own wedding?
Yeah, it was not my own wedding. I had to stay at my own wedding. No, it was a wedding, and it was actually at the same venue that my little brother's wedding was at. So I kind of I came back to like kind of conquer those demons, and I did so successfully. But also, we're now sitting here the day after the wedding, and I'm probably never going to drink alcohol again. Like, I'm not hungover necessarily. I'm not now because this is like evening time. But, you know, it's one of those things where, like, it was a really fun day, and in the hours immediately following, I did pay for it a little bit. That was that. I also started a new show. That's like the main thing I wanted to shout out. And I've only watched 1 episode, but it's a very interesting show. Now, I've mentioned on the podcast before that I'm really into murder mysteries right now, and a show premiered on Hulu. I think it's technically FX on Hulu, but I don't really know what the dividing line is there, called A Murder at the End of the World. Now, this is a show. It seems to be following a very similar sort of, I'll use the phrase designing principle again, of like Knives Out, where basically a bunch of very specific and interesting people get together at a very isolated location, and they're invited by a rich guy, and someone dies. And then the protagonist has to find out who did the murder, basically. 1 episode in, it does seem pretty captivating, so I'm definitely going to continue with it. I believe there's currently 3 episodes out, so I have some catching up to do. But again, I had a lot of responsibilities this week. But I'm going to be kind of going through that, and I'll probably be providing more updates on how that's going in the coming days. And then, you know, kind of prepping for Thanksgiving, because that's like nearly upon us, and making some plans for that.
I have a question for you, though. So last week you said you were downloading God of War.
Have not started it yet.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, though. You're keeping me honest. Haven't started it yet.
More so, I'm just excited for you. I know it's not like your top priority. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I'm just very excited about the possibility.
What I will tell you is that it's completely downloaded.
You'd love to see it.
So the skids are greased. If I want to play it, I can get on my console and just zoom right into it. So I will keep you updated on that front. I'll swing it over to you, Nerdbomber, to finish this out here.
All right, so we too started a new show, Silo, and this show has actually been out for a little bit. This is based on a Hugh Howey book. This is on Apple TV Plus, the Wool series, Silo series. The book that I read initially was Wool. I think that the series is called the Silo series. And essentially, without giving too much by way of spoilers, the show is based on a society that is living in an underground silo. Nobody really knows why they're there. All information and for objects from the quote-unquote before times is strictly forbidden and has pretty much been wiped from the society's knowledge. And on different levels of the silo, you know, there's different types of jobs. You have the mechanics down below who are keeping the entire, like, the turbine generators running to keep the silo up and going. There's farms, there's, you know, the medical levels. Every person basically has a job. And the only like major rule, and obviously there's like laws and stuff, but the major rule is that you cannot leave the silo. You cannot go outside. And if you ask to go outside, you're basically sent out in a suit, and you have to clean the sensors and the cameras, which show an image of the world outside. And it's basically a death sentence because they show people, you know, every time you go outside, they die. And in a way, this too is kind of framed as a mystery. I don't want to necessarily get too much into what the mystery is because I feel like, especially if you haven't read the book, going into the show, not knowing a whole lot about the characters and the, I guess, mysteries that need to be solved makes for a more interesting viewing experience. And Techtic, you know, as someone who didn't read the books, would you say, like, kind of going in blind, is it a different, like, I kind of know what's going to happen. So I'm like sitting there waiting to see how they're going to like carry these things out that I already know are going to happen. But from your perspective as a completely new person to this IP, like how are you saying, like, how do you feel about the way that this is laid out without giving spoilers away?
I don't know that I can tell you that it's a different experience had I have read it because I haven't read it. But as far as like the way in which I'm experiencing it, a lot of it so far seems like not real to the human experience, if that makes sense. Like all of these people in this world are basically conditioned to not ask questions, but in my opinion, the whole human experience is to be inquisitive and to ask questions. So the fact that the society has been this way for at least 100 years, it seems troubling to me that there isn't revolutions basically all the time.
So I watched this show. Mm-hmm. I don't know if people remember, but I'm really curious to get your thoughts on it. You've read the book, so like it sounds like Techtic doesn't really know much, but like I have not read the book. I do. I have not read it. I want to eventually. I don't even want to tell you. I'm sure I mentioned what I thought of the show after we finished the first season. Like I mentioned it here, but if you don't remember, I'm gonna kind of put a stopper in my overall thoughts on the show for now until you guys get done with it, so we can see kind of if we're on the same page. Might be a good idea for like a secret segment or something like that to kind of just do a full debrief on it, maybe a spoiler event on what we thought.
Did you like it or no? Like, can you give it that?
That's kind of what I don't want to say, but like I will say probably not. I will say I'm not sure I'm going to watch season 2 because by the way, there will be a season 2. But like, I don't know that I've watched many better shows in the past couple of years. Let me put it that way.
I will say there is something, the experience of reading the book, the way that the characters are portrayed are definitely different. And I remember when I read the book, and granted, I read this book years and years ago, close to when it first came out, because the actual story behind the novel and how it got published is very interesting. So Hugh Howey actually like self-published on the internet his story, and like it was just like free and open to read online, and then eventually that it got bundled into like book format and then became like a published work. And
isn't that to some extent what happened with The Martian as well, or maybe that's just how the author of The Martian got his start? It was a very similar situation.
Yeah, it like The Martian, the Wool/Silo series, all kind of, they were some of those first internet books that kind of made the transition into traditional publishing. And super, like, I found that super interesting, especially like it wasn't that common at the time when that book came out. And I devoured the book. Like, I loved it. And there is something, I don't know what exactly is missing in the show. I don't know if I am as attached to the characters as I was in the book. I think that might be my biggest thing. What
I will say in support of that is that I think my overarching emotion while watching a lot of the show, you get a sense, if you know that it's based on a book, which they make pretty clear in like the opening credits and blah, 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 like it will make you wish that you had read the book. I think that's like the thing I think most about that show is that you watch certain scenes and you almost think, boy, I wish that probably would have been really cool to read.
Like I think
a lot of it would probably translate better.
There's a lot of details that they obviously, like in TV, you kind of have that problem where you can't go off in an exposition. And even in like books, you have to find a good balance. But like you can't go off on like a paragraph to describe the culture or the society and how it works. Like you have to kind of infer how that works through the characters. And yeah, I just don't know if it all necessarily translates.
I mean, but yes, some of one of the laws of like storytelling in television is show don't tell, but sometimes you need to tell like that. And I think there are instances in the story of Silo or Wool or whichever one it is that like, I think that's probably necessary. I don't know. And, I don't know what was changed between the book and the television adaptation. I assume there were changes, or maybe even just subtle changes that were made. I will say there are things about the show that I think are great. I think the production value is very high. The cast is good, but like it left me wanting mostly to have read the story rather than watched it.
Which I definitely recommend. It's an amazing book. So go read it. And the show's not terrible, but if you read the book, it's just a different experience for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a fair spot to leave that. So that brings us to Quiz Town. Unless do you have any more updates to provide?
No, that's the big one.
I'm hosting the quiz this week. I'm also extremely appreciative of the topic that was chosen. I assume because I've mentioned how much I like ER, this topic was chosen. The topic is Michael Crichton, and we'll get to an ER question in a second. But before we do, I want to go through the quiz tracking, the records. Nerdbomber currently 12-10, top dog. Techtic at 11-11. I'm at 10-16, so I kind of suck. That hasn't really changed. And Steven 3-1. So Nerdbomber and Techtic basically fighting for the top spot. Me kind of just on the outside looking in at this point. But hey, I'm a good sport most of the time. So I'll pick up the quiz questions here. You know the drill, all Price is Right style. We will have Nerdbomber go first to give Techtic a slight advantage. Everyone gets either a single +1 or an answer of 1 in the course of the quiz. So without further ado, my first question, of course, is going to be about ER. For those that do not know, Michael Crichton, one of his more popular, probably most popular television products, and one of the most popular shows of all time was ER. He was the writer, and I think at times the producer on the show. How many episodes of ER have been made in total?
This is like a redonkulous number. I think it was on for a while. And this is back when like seasons were longer too. I'm going to say 200 episodes.
201.
Come on.
Using the +1 early, and it was effective. I believe ER had 15 seasons. And like, as you mentioned, you were correct. Seasons of television back then, I think, had like 24 episodes or so. It had 331 episodes. So this show was a big deal. And I can confirm that having watched it. I believe my wife and I are currently on season 8, but I don't actually remember. So like we're more than halfway. But also we might stop soon because kind of it's like getting worse and a lot of the main cast has left. In any case, that puts Techtic on the board with an early lead. One of his more famous novels, Michael Crichton is a novelist. One of the more famous novels that he wrote, which was obviously adapted into the Spielberg film, is Jurassic Park. How many pages was Jurassic Park?
742.
Absolutely not. 200. I'm going to use 200 again.
Yeah, a Harry Potter book, it was not. It's coming in at 399 pages. He turned in a 400-page draft, and his editor said, you got to cut some out. And so it became 399 pages. So Nerdbomber's on the board, and it is tied up. Sticking with, famous Michael Crichton properties, the first film that he wrote and directed was Westworld, which went on to be adapted for television in 2016 by HBO. But as for the film, when was the film originally released?
Not the TV show?
The film, yeah. I already told you when the TV show was released.
I know, but I didn't even know there was a film. 1970. No. That doesn't make sense. I'm trying to think of like when he obviously then was alive. No, 1990.
And T-Bone. That's what he got for us.
This was 2001.
Guys, actually, 1970 was a great guess.
Really?
1973.
How old
No
is
way.
he?
What?
Well, first of all, he's no longer alive. He's no longer alive. That is not a quiz question. He has passed away. But it was the first film he wrote and directed. He had quite a long career. 1973. This movie famously was, I think, the first movie to use 2D computer-generated graphics. I don't believe this movie was necessarily a critical or commercial success, but obviously it went on to inspire a lot and ultimately inspired the TV show down the line. So, no points there. You're both tied at 1. And we'll move on to question 4. Bearing in mind the answer you just got, his first novel, titled Odds On, was published under a pseudonym he used very often early in his career, John Lang. When was Odds On published?
1962.
1963.
An extremely effective +1. 1966. So you guys were all over it. He made the jump to film soon after that, obviously, but that was when his first novel was published under the pseudonym. His first novel published under his actual name, I believe, was The Andromeda Strain, and I believe that was in the early 70s, but that's not a quiz question. The Andromeda Strain, of course, also inspired a television show, and I believe a movie at some point. But for our final question, Nerdbomber is in the lead 2-1. Final question is once again about the Jurassic franchise. The most recent of those franchise films is Jurassic World Dominion. What was the worldwide box office gross of Jurassic World Dominion?
300 million.
Is 400 million a +1 or no?
Boy, that's a very philosophical question. I think I'm going to say no, but it's not great.
I mean, it's 100 million away. Like,
yeah, it's true. That is the math of it. If you want to answer 400 million, I'm not going to stop you.
Nerdbomber, I'll let you weigh in.
You do you, boo-boo.
400 million.
Okay, you had a lot of room to wiggle there. Worldwide, guys. Worldwide. We're talking $1 billion.
Oh, yeah, I know. I wanted to keep it tight.
$1.004 billion. So the Jurassic franchise, for all of its critical not so greatness, is doing just fine commercially. Well, it's 2-2. That brings us to our tiebreaker question, which will be a text-in question. And I need to pull up a statistic here because I know what the question is, but I forgot it. So just give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. As an adolescent, Crichton felt isolated socially because of his height. How tall was Michael Crichton? It doesn't actually say, but I'm going to guess it's how tall he was as an adult. We're going to go feet and inches for the units, by the way. We do have a winner. The winner was very close, actually, with their guess. So it's interesting. You guys both took my question intro to mean very different things. He was socially isolated because he was quite tall. Techtic weighed in thinking he was a short king, as we call them these days. He at 5'2". Nerdbomber guessed 6'6". 6'9" was the correct answer.
Nice.
Also, this another interesting fact I just want to toss in here, perhaps relatedly. In 1992, Michael Crichton was ranked among People magazine's 50 most beautiful people.
What now?
So I think you would call him a tall king. But in any case, Nerdbomber takes it home. Her lead in the quiz game, it seems to grow. So Techtic moves to 11 and 12, Nerdbomber to 13 and 10, and I remain at 10 and 16. We'll pick it up next week with Nerdbomber hosting the old Quiz-a-rooney. And in the meantime, we want to thank you all for joining us. And, head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review there. Tell your friends, tell your dog, tell your wife, tell your husband. And stay safe and keep on podcasting.